BMW as a brand has always kind of been on the chopping block for hate for quite some time now. Part of that is their own fault, like when they made the M5 E60 and they thought that we wouldn't care about the horrible reliability. And part of it is the owner's faults, because it seems like every single BMW owner out there likes to think that they're 10 times better than the next guy just because his headlights aren't circular. But the number one reason why BMW gets so much hate is simply because they get too much love for making the ultimate driving machines. My name is Mark Roden, and this is the deep dive on the BMW E36. Term E36, before I get a bunch of people confused as to why when they looked up E36 for sale they didn't come up, is just a chassis code given to the third generation of the BMW 3 Series in order for the engineers to tell the cars apart when looking for parts for them. Since the 3 Series has been around for quite some time now and all of them share similar names, it's easiest to tell people you drive an E36 rather than say, I drive a 328i, and have them try to figure out which generation you're talking about. But the E36 is yet another way to prove that the 90s truly were the best time for car enthusiasts ever, since it was rolled off the assembly line in 1990, right around the same time all the other legends that we talk about were built as well. At first, the car was only offered in sedan or coupe models, but over time we got to see a bunch of different body styles for the wonderful E36, including a convertible, compact, which looks horrible, wagon, and even something called the Bower, which looks something like the Pope would drive.
Nice. Made me happy, made me smile. Nice.
Before the E36 came out, the second generation of 3 Series, or the E30, was a very successful car and honestly kind of paved the way for how people would view luxury for years to come. But the E36 did everything that the E30 did, but better. It had a much larger body, which meant the interior was also larger, but it still kept its wonderful looks and nimble handling for anybody who wanted to do some spirited driving. And in terms of safety features, the E36 offered airbags everywhere that you could possibly need them, air braking assist, and stability control, which obviously is on most cars today, but back then wasn't super common, and electronic climate control as well to give you the best driving experience that you could imagine in a car that was built for the sole purpose of getting you from point A to point B on time, but while having fun doing it. Now, this is usually the part of my deep dives where I go into the car's performance and what engines and stuff it came with, but sadly for us, BMW likes to put like 15 different engine options in every single generation of their cars, so it may be a little bit hard to go over all of them. Instead, I'm going to very quickly go over every single one in order from the lowest spec to the highest spec, so we don't waste like 20 minutes going over every single different trim level and what was different about them. They go like this: the 316i, 318i, 318IS, 320i, 323i, 325i, 328i, and finally the M3. The car was also offered with diesel options. Those are as follows: the 318 TDS, the 325 TD, and the 325 TDS. A good rule of thumb when talking about BMW trim levels and which one is better is usually the higher the number in the name, the better the car is in terms of performance. Also, a little cheat code for you is whatever the last two numbers are, for example 28 and 328i, is usually the size of the motor in that specific trim level. However, this is not always reliable, since some cars nowadays, like the 335i, actually come with a 3-liter twin-turbo inline-6 instead of a 3.5-liter like the name would suggest. But either way, back to the E36, and the two trim levels that we are going to be going over are the 328i and the wonderful M3. As for the wonderful 328i, the reason we are going over this one and not the other ones is because it is the most wanted version of the car in other trim levels. It came with a 2.8-liter inline-6, of course, because of the name. Remember I told you about that? Come on now. And it managed to push out 190 horsepower going to the rear wheels. Due to this car not only being incredibly cheap, sitting at right under $5,000 pretty frequently, but also the performance it offers while not having to spend M3 money on the car, this car has become sort of an icon in the tuner world, which is very interesting to be honest, since most tuner cars are usually Japanese sports cars and not really in the Euro scene. This car is such a good tuner car, as a matter of fact, that even in today's world, over 30 years later, these cars are still seen as an amazing way to get into something incredibly fun for dirt cheap. It doesn't even matter what kind of motorsports you're trying to get into, the 328i E36 will always be a good option. For the boys who like drifting, these cars are fighting for the #1 spot right next to the 240SX all day for being rear-wheel drive, dirt cheap, tons of mods available, and loving to get side sideways with the most simple mods on it. For the guys looking to get into track racing, there really isn't much better option than a cheap BMW. Every single one of BMW's amazing creations have always excelled at the track, and the E36 is no different. Now, obviously, the M3 is better for this, but turning a normal sedan into something that can rip around a track faster than the supercar owners is something that we all want to experience at least once, I feel like. As for the rally or off-road boys, this may come as a surprise, but the E36 actually has been seen as a rally car in the past. Now, it's not the most successful, since it is an all-wheel drive, but it does get the job done if you just want something a little bit different and with more of a challenge. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about the 328i so bad. Yes, the M3 is amazing, and we'll get into why in a little bit, but the 328i of this generation is definitely not something to sleep on. It can literally do it all, and even if you genuinely just want something that is fun to drive but can also be daily driven, yes, the E36 is a good choice for that too. There are tons of people on the internet that will tell you that the E36 is a very unreliable car and that BMW is a brand that should not be trusted when it comes to reliability. And I actually somewhat agree with them. BMW, as much as I love everything about them, really is a bit of a gamble on whether or not the car will be reliable. It usually depends on the owner before you, since these cars tend to take a little bit more maintenance to stay running and driving. But luckily for you, the 328i E36 had a very reliable motor in it. Usually, the ones you want to stay away from are the bigger motors like the V8s or, God forbid, the V10s, but trust me, in a naturally aspirated inline 6 from BMW will not cause you many issues if you know what you're looking for. But now let's get into the nitty-gritty, the car that truly started BMW's reign of terror, the E36 M3. The E30 M3 that came before this car was indeed an amazing car and was technically the start of the M3, but there is a huge difference between the M3 E30 and the M3 E36, and that, my friends, is something called homologation special. You see, the E30 was actually built to be a homologation standard, whereas the M3 E36 was not, meaning that the car was not technically built specifically for competition, which may sound a little bit worse, but think about what that means really quickly. Homologation cars are usually very rough around the edges and only have one goal in mind: beat the competition, whereas normal production cars are more forgiving and in general make up for a much better driving experience on public roads and the track alike. And this is no different with the first two M3s either. Everyone that ever drove both the E36 and E30 M3 say that the E36 is just an all-around much better car to drive, which makes sense when you think about how well the platform was. Just like other amazing handling cars we've seen, the E36 M3 had a perfect 50-50 weight distribution along with some of the best suspension pieces the world had to offer, helping to make this car more planted than anything offered from BMW at the time. As for the engine, the BMW M3 also got a better engine than the E30, getting rid of the inline 4 and instead opting for the wonderful straight 6 that we all know and love from BMW. It was a 3.2-liter inline 6 called the S52, and it managed to push out 240 horsepower, which is a whole 50 horsepower more than the 328i, which, like we already established, was already a very good car. The platform, the E36 M3, was so good, by the way, that they actually decided to use everything from the car to make another very popular sports car from BMW, the BMW Z3, which gave other roadsters like the Porsche Boxster and Mazda Miata a run for their money. The E36 had a car out there for literally everybody, whether you were on a budget and just needed something practical, or if you were more well off and could afford to drive the best that Germany had to offer at the time. The BMW E36 had a bunch of options to choose from, and nowadays they are still to this day seen being driven around absolutely everywhere, more by young adults rather than the old people who used to drive them, but still, they are selling incredibly well. And if a car manages to stay relevant and an amazing option for new drivers 30 years in the future, I think that is what makes a car so great. That is the end of today's deep dive on the wonderful BMW E36 52. That's the real name of the car. Everybody acts like it's not, but I know it is. You can't fool me, buddy. Let me know what other type of deep dives that you'd like to see down below in the comment section. Before you do, though, please be sure to check, because I see a lot of people starting to say, like, oh, you should do one on the Acura TL, you should do one on the Miata, and it's like, I've already done those. So start to, make sure you look at what I've already done before, so that your comment isn't just kind of, I hate to say this word because it sounds rude, but pointless. Because if you comment something that I've already done, then obviously I'm not going to do it again. So it's just kind of a waste. So if you comment something that you want to see though, and it's not a car I've already done, I will absolutely try. If I see it and I already don't have another like 5 videos before that one, I will do it eventually. So thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Das Vidania, and have a nice night.